did find a little bit of that tension in the startup. I was someone who was new, had a lot of energy, had a lot of experience. We had candid conversations. He really felt like he was on the precipice of wanting to build more and build faster. And
Hey everyone, welcome to Startup Anthology. I'm Jeremy Willis. So I recently started co-hosting an event here in Austin called the Military Connected Mentorship Meetup. It's a networking event for veteran entrepreneurs and veteran business people, military connected people, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a veteran. Each meetup is co-hosted with another podcast called Command Post Cohort. We have a fireside chat with a military connected entrepreneur, business person. One of their co-hosts, Andrew Partin, and I interview veteran entrepreneurs and business people who shares their lessons learned from military service to the civilian world. The most recent one we had in June, we interviewed Johanna Wynne. She's an Army veteran who just recently retired from the Army at Army Futures Command here in Austin. So hopefully you'll enjoy this episode. Thanks for listening.
hey, I'm Joanna.
Hi, Joanna.
Oh, sorry.
Chris.
Nice to meet you. I've heard so much about you. No,
All queued up. Yeah, so I can say better now.
my kind of guy. So don't be too hard on me.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Hey, we're going to go ahead and get started with the program for the evening.
There's a
So
nice
you come
cup
around
of tea.
here where you can see us all.
Hey,
There,
who
look at
are
that
you
guy.
connected to?
I was stuck in your house. Live macaroni. There he is.
Awesome.
I good to see you. All right, we're going to get started. We got a great guest for you tonight. Hopefully it'll be a good show. I know it will be. So, let's kick it off.
Yeah. Hey everyone, welcome to the Military Connected Monthly Mentorship Meetup. It's a lot of words. I'm Jeremy Willis. This is actually the second time I've co-hosted. The last time was the first, so this is number 2. I'm a Navy veteran, and I started a company called Startup Anthology about a year ago. So that's kind of me. We're not at our normal location. No, we're at Capital Factory tonight. This week, they have some event going on, so they politely kicked us out. So we're over here tonight at the Pershing House. So part of the thing that we do is we do a crossover episode between Startup Anthology podcast and Command Cohort. That's Andrew. I guess tonight is Joanne Wynne, right? Wynne?
Yeah.
Okay. Just thank you all for being here tonight. Just want to shout out a couple of the sponsors. We have IVMF Bunker Labs. I don't know if anyone's been associated with that. I did the veteran residency program back in the winter. It was great. Texas Veterans Commission is back in the back. You can talk to her. And then also Dress for Success.
Texas Veteran Commission, Combined Arms.
Combined Arms, okay. So the way we do this is just conversational, and then about 30 minutes of recording and a conversation, and then we'll do kind of like a guided networking thing at the end, where we can ask follow-up questions, ask anything. The way we're going to do it is kind of introduce yourself, real quick introduction, your offer, and then your request. So it's what you can give and what you want in return. So no pitching. It's a no pitching zone. So just keep that in mind. So
Bathrooms are right across the way if
Yeah.
anybody needs. And yeah.
so
And then there's 2 doors.
Two
Yep.
doors.
Right, yeah.
This
Yeah.
one sticks.
So you
Push
don't have
ahead.
to walk across the camera.
Yep.
okay.
So, Joanna, welcome and thank you for being our wonderful guest this evening. Why don't you tell us kind of your journey through the Army, coming out through the Army, and then into a startup world?
Sure. First of all, I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. It's awesome to see folks come out and support. And I was born into an Army family in Fulda, Germany, height of the Cold War. I'm sure the Fulda Gap rings a bell for many or some of you. And from there, moved about 10 times before the age of 14. Ended up in Washington, D.C. at a very competitive and crazy all-girls school. That's another podcast in and of itself.
Another episode.
My dad was in the Army, so that makes sense. But ended up declining my dad's alma mater, West Point, to go to the University of Vermont, which was my rebellious act. But I did ROTC there, and I was able to swim there, and found myself commissioned into the military intelligence branch, where I served for 20 years, 3 deployments, and had the fortune of being part of the plank holders at Army Futures Command. So one of the first 100 folks who helped get that command up and running. So a lot of interesting lessons from that experience. And then, much like they advise you not to do, I jumped right into work. They say, take your time, figure out who you are, spend some time really thinking about your values and your passion. And there's nothing wrong if you find the perfect match to jump right into the next chapter. I was recruited by an entrepreneur and his startup, which at the time was very enticing. And this we can get into some of the specifics later. But long story short, he had a vision for me to be in a very specific role for the city of Austin. And unfortunately, while the work looked promising in terms of the contract being awarded, it wasn't awarded. So I came on board as overhead and was working to learn the business, and then that contract never came through. So I think that's a great lesson in joining the startup world. That's a risk that he took and a risk that I took. I actually did a skill bridge with Dell and had something lined up there, which was also very solid, but the startup opportunity was really exciting, and I really thought that I would have an opportunity to make an impact. And I could get into specifics, but long story short, I think that's part of the game. You have to take some risks, and in this case, it didn't necessarily work out, but I learned a lot in the process, and yeah, I think that's kind of how I found myself in the startup space, and now just exploring what that means in terms of next. What's that?
It means to be free.
Yeah.
Working
I'm a
free agent. Well, I wanted to go back a little bit, and you talked about the beginning of your story. It's like you didn't go to West Point, and you grew up Army. Your dad went to West Point. You had an appointment to West Point. Why did you not take it?
So I visited a number of times. I went to the week-long leadership camp between your junior and senior year, and it's a beautiful place. Every time I visit there, I'm inspired, and I'm proud that my father went there. It was a really hard decision to say no. I joke that it was rebellion, but in truth, it really was my way to say, I've got to figure this path out for myself, and that it made a lot of sense for my dad to encourage me to go there. Every decision up to that point really had been made by the Army, and
Your whole life, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
From birth, you were in Deers, like as soon as you.
Yes,
soon
exactly,
as you were born.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I was
-3.
Yeah.
Yes,
you were-
exactly. I couldn't wait to get my ID card at age 10. I mean, that
Really?
was a big deal. Yeah, I visited, and I didn't feel like it was the place for me. And I knew that by me going, I was denying someone else who really did feel like it was a place for them to go. And I wanted to chart, my own path, and ironically ended up staying in for a full career, which none of my West Point colleagues ended up staying in for 20 years. Not that
really?
makes any difference, but I found my own way, and that was important. And my dad was disappointed, but he denies that he was ever disappointed. So,
Well, I mean, you still went in the Army, right?
Right.
So you still were a cadet in the ROTC,
Right.
and so you still got a commission. So, I mean, there's maybe a little bit of time. He's like, oh, come on. But then ultimately had a 20-year career.
yeah,
So-
no, absolutely. And I feel kind of blessed to have the best of both worlds, and that the West Point community and family is so strong that just by my father being an academy grad, I feel like his class was so supportive of me, and so I really benefited from that special alumni network in a different way.
So why did you end up joining the Army? Like, why did you end up going to the ROTC? Is that a guilt because you didn't go to West Point, or was it?
I mean, there was a little bit of compromise there,
Okay,
right? I definitely think that because I moved around so much and was sort of creating, or not necessarily creating a new identity anywhere I went, it was sort of survival. Like, what are the conditions that I'm faced with in Fort Polk, Louisiana versus
A lot of things.
living in Central America, and very different worlds, and yet they were butted up against each other. And so at a young age, you're kind of just in survival mode, but not realizing that you're in survival mode. And I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do next. And because my dad felt comfortable mentoring me into the Army family, it felt like a fairly safe choice, which is kind of ironic because a lot of people, what, join the Army? That's not safe.
What's
But
something you knew?
it
It was safe for you.
For me, it was
Yeah.
it's just what you did.
Familiar.
That following in his footsteps, it's certainly what I knew. My sister, this is funny, she did a semester of ROTC, said not for me, and ended up joining the Peace Corps, which service is service.
This is the same, really.
Let's say, yeah.
Same.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I mean, runs deep in the family, and that was how she expressed it. But I heard a number of, Heather doesn't know what she's giving up by not doing her OTC and this, that, the other. And so I took that, absorbed that, and, was the obedient daughter.
Are you the oldest one?
I'm actually the youngest.
The youngest one,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Oh, that's
Are you
interesting.
number 3?
No,
three.
I'm two. Only two.
They're babies. They're the rebellious ones.
But they're 6.5 years apart from us, and they
that's-
say that that's like two only children. I don't know.
So, you said it was kind of like your rebellious act, not going to West Point. So do you think there are parallels, perhaps, between like a rebellious act, choosing not going to West Point, choosing not going and working for Dell? Is there any similarities in that?
I hadn't thought of that, but I do think that there's something to be said about something inside of me that is interested in exploring what's possible outside of what society says should be the way, choosing a harder route potentially. Not that that's the best thing to do, but something that I can make my mark on, I think has always sort of intrigued me. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing that I need to journal about.
I think it's interesting too that you were, like, you've made two big decisions, right? It was the go to University of Vermont, and that was not the norm. And then it was to, do a startup, work at the startup here in town and do the Dell thing. So it's like, there's like these two big milestones of things happening. And in fact, just like our pre-interview we were talking about, we did a startup in the Army with Army Futures Command being a plank. What was that experience like? What was the going there, being really, really early on at a brand new command?
Yeah. So it was super exciting. General Murray, who was the first commander of Army Futures Command, used to joke, but there was so much truth to it, that we were a startup in the middle of a major merger acquisition, because there was so much that had to be figured out in Austin and in terms of how the organization was going to wrap their arms around the thousands of people and the dozens of organizations that had some role in modernizing our Army. And I would say the energy in downtown Austin was palpable. Everyone was excited about the potential to do things differently, to break down silos, to cut through red tape, to figure out new ways of doing things, because collectively the Army leadership had agreed that the old ways of doing business weren't working. What was really interesting, having been there at first as part of the Intelligence and Security Directorate, and then later as a support battalion commander, was watching the turnover. So people that were initially assigned to Army Futures Command as a task force were very deliberately selected to be part of this new thing that was going to require a lot of comfort in discomfort, that were willing to work against the ways things have always been done.
So not big army.
Right. In
Yeah.
fact, we had this acculturation process, which is a week long, and we initially were going to go by first names at Army Futures Command, which
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
exactly.
I didn't know I had a first name when I got out to
Yeah.
the Columbine. Yeah.
So General Murray was comfortable to the point of being called like General Mike. You know, even that was like, what? It didn't make sense. And we're conventional, right? It's not the special forces. We were a conventional unit. So this idea was really foreign to a lot of people. And I remember having a major disagreement with a sergeant major one of the first weeks I was there, because he just thought this was the most disrespectful thing ever. Like, people had worked for their rank and they deserved to be called Sergeant First Class this or General that. And my thought was, hey, we got to buy into this. If we're going to do things differently, we're going to build a different culture, we got to be all in. And so we eventually came to terms, but that was an illustration of a lot of the conflict I think that
Right.
many people had. Some were totally all in, and others came to Austin because there was a lot of hiring happening. People thought, hey, this is a great place for me to retire, and they need people. They weren't necessarily bought into the concept, they just saw the opportunity. So there was this interesting clash of people who were totally committed to a new way, and then folks that were excellent in doing well in the Army that we knew, and not necessarily the organization that we were driving
Okay.
to move toward.
Crept back in despite your rebellious first name.
Right,
Sins.
yeah, well, to
Do they
kind
still
of-
do that there?
No,
They don't.
absolutely
Oh, no,
not. No. And I would say that with every PCS, people would come and say, what the heck? What are you guys doing? And there was some truth to it. We went so far left of what was traditionally accepted in the halls of the Pentagon that we weren't misunderstood completely. We had just different names for standard functions. And so we thought we were being innovative, and the Pentagon was like, what are you talking about? Like, you guys are operations. Stop calling it what was it called? Yes, exactly. We created new names for things that were really not novel, but by putting a new name on it.
Got a new name.
Right, exactly.
It's not G1, it's
Right.
capital.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the Pentagon was like, what is human capital? I mean, we get it, but you're G1. So there was all sorts of conflict on that front.
That's a very interesting point, because I feel like that's like kind of back to the rebellious point as well there. So I also like that you brought up, we got to buy into this, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of overlap with that in the startup community as well, right? Because if you're going to have to speak at this point, Jeremy, because I've
I'll
not been
try,
in a startup.
but not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
I feel like you have to be that way, right? You have to be leaning forward and be entirely in it. Do you feel like there were similarities there as well?
No, absolutely. I think that sort of mirroring my experience at Army Futures Command against my startup experience, I feel that I was really excited about the idea of doing things differently in the Army, because I saw throughout my career that a lot of activities and decisions were made without a whole lot of questioning of why we're doing it. We're doing it this way because we've always done it this way.
Groupthink.
Right.
Yeah.
And Army Futures Command was really committed to
not-
but it did require a certain amount of buy-in and passion to that end. Now, the startup that I joined, I was very interested in learning more about, but it wasn't my startup, right? Like, I found my way into it because this individual saw potential in me to help serve his mission. And I sort of convinced myself that I could be bought in, but over time realized how important it really is to be passionate about what you are doing, because if you're not, you start to see the cracks, I think, a lot sooner, right? You start to see, why are we doing it this way? And I don't know, you're not willing to compromise, I think, as much as when you're fully vested and you start comparing it to other experiences rather than maybe just trying to trailblaze your way through under these startup conditions.
Okay.
How did you're talking about start off first names and then now obviously not. What was else happened in that transition as Army Futures Command, started the clash, the different people that are there that comes in from like
Sure.
DC or they're only
Yeah.
thinking about their next rank instead
Sure.
of innovation and trying to figure out how to make the Army better.
I think it's human nature to default to what you know. And if you are not part of that initial excitement, there needs to be a deliberate effort to bridge the gap, right? If you're coming from a conventional organization and then you fall upon something that doesn't look like what you're accustomed to, if there's not a conversation that says, hey, we're still figuring it out, this isn't perfect, but this is the way that we're doing it now, and this is why we're doing it this way, and we need your help to make it even better, then the frustration of the inevitable challenges of a startup compared with the comfort of the way things have always been done, and maybe they're not the best way, but they made sense within the context of the organization that I came from, and I could see how it could apply here. It's really, I just think it's human nature to fall back on your own system. So I use the example of just like a CRM or even dialing it back to SharePoint. Like if you don't have systems that help flatten information, everyone's going to default to the attachment on the email. It's just the easy way, right? And then your knowledge management is totally busted, and there's silos. So that's just one example of things I saw that we had so much potential, and yet we had actually regressed in a lot of capability that was available in other parts of the Army simply because we were also new that we ended up reverting back to things that were just sort of the path of least resistance. And that became more and more the case, I think, as folks came in that weren't part of that initial energy. But I think that has changed over time, and I think there's probably people in this room that that could argue that Army Futures Command, you probably, has kind of found its rhythm a bit more. But I sort of left at a time where there was a clash there in terms of innovative trailblazers and older guard coming in to question
And you
how
could
crazy we
neither
were.
confirm nor deny.
Yeah, that sounds like a great chance to change topics.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and now the model is completely, it's not thrown away, but I feel for the organization in that there's a whole new challenge ahead with the merger of TRADOC and AFC, right? So all of this incredible
that?
investment in
Talk about
what
old school
what
Army and
was.
new
But
Army.
I think in terms of the notion of being adaptive and being comfortable with discomfort, like I don't know that you could get more uncomfortable than the conditions that are now faced by AFC and TRADOC, right?
Yeah.
And so the people that have been there, plank holders that are still there, hopefully will be more seasoned and open to dealing with this next curveball, maybe?
yeah. So
Okay.
no
It's
different.
something completely different.
We're
moving
gonna
right
take a
along.
hard left.
We can edit that out.
So, with your experience, almost really 2 startups, right, outside and inside, so to speak. Tell me about Legos.
Oh, goodness. So when we were having just a quick conversation about whether or not this would be a good fit, I was reminded of an article by a woman named Molly Graham, and she worked at Facebook and a couple of other major tech startups, and now is doing her Google, yes.
Google.
And she really became an expert in rapid scaling of organizations, and she created a analogy related to scaling, dealing with Legos. So imagine you've got this great project, building this amazing tower of Legos, and yet you're wearing multiple hats, you're doing all the things. The project is starting to get higher and higher, and as you're managing all these elements of building this thing, you realize that you need more help. So you start bringing people on, and other people start playing with your Legos, and the more they start playing with your Legos, the less comfortable you are with giving your Legos away. And rather than sort of embracing this newfound help that you have, you can feel almost like a kid, hey, give me back my toys. I know how to build this thing, and this is my tower of Legos. And what she offers is that by sharing your Legos, by divesting some of the responsibility that you initially had in building your Legos, you're able to focus on the next game or the next opportunity. So having a comfort in not just delegation, but really focusing on more strategic roles so that you have the bandwidth to take your organization to the next level, to truly help scale it. Because if you're focused down and in and where the next piece goes on the Legos, you're not thinking about the next building that you can build. And I did find a little bit of that tension in the startup that I was part, because I was someone who was new, had a lot of energy, had a lot of experience, and I was wanting to play with the Legos, and I'm not sure that they were totally ready, right? So you have to be ready to scale, I think. And
Okay.
and we had candid conversations. He really felt like he was on the precipice of wanting to build more and build faster and control what was known success, right? And so I think you do have to, again, take the leap, take the risk. Am I willing to let some things go so that I truly can focus on the things that are going to take my organization to the next level? And if I don't have comfort with other people playing with my Legos, then I'm going to maintain my Legos and they can go play somewhere else. Her recommendation is give folks opportunities that are, and goals that are big and ambitious and help focus on the future so that the bandwidth of thinking about their previous tasks or the multiple hats that they wore are less their focus, and they're really focused on that next chapter.
To me, that sounds a lot like, as you're very much in control of your Legos, you have the vision of how you want to see things and how they're supposed to be done. And as you grow the startup and bring on more people, there's a level of trust that has to be conveyed to the new hire that, number one, you're going to allow them to do things that the way they want to do things in accordance with your left and right limits. It's like a two-way street there, because you have to trust them that they can do it, and they have to trust you that you're not going to
Pull it back.
pull it back.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
To allow you to, you said, allow you more bandwidth to continue to scale and grow the business.
Sure, and I think back to the original wrinkle that I described,
Original wrinkle.
be willing to or have a plan B if you don't win that work that you brought the person on to do. You have to have a deliberate goal for them and help them pivot into something else. So just as your environment changes, what are the expectations of the people that you're wanting to give Legos to, but maybe have a little apprehension of? And if the blueprint for what you're building changes, how ready are you to embrace them working on other projects that maybe initially you weren't envisioning them having their hands in? And so I think, to his credit, realizing that the work wasn't one, although there maybe could have been some more transparency in how we approach the next steps, I think he realized that it wasn't necessarily going to be a great fit, and he made the decision early on-ish to, for us to talk and say, hey, this didn't work out as we imagined. And that's a hard conversation. It's a hard thing. I know that he was a veteran, so he felt, some responsibility for recruiting me and kind of pitching this idea of his company, and then it didn't manifest. So that was a hard thing, I'm sure. And actually one of the points that Molly Graham gives, not necessarily specific to my experience, but communicating early and often roles and expectations, and when it's clear that it's not going to be a good fit,
Find out fast.
do everybody
Yeah.
a favor,
Pull that
right? And
Band-Aid.
it's
Yeah.
painful, but it's better to make that hard decision to go and part ways than force something that isn't going to work out.
It's because you're so rebellious.
Yeah, that might be part of it.
So looking back over your career, and I guess, what are 3 big major lessons that you've learned?
Yeah.
Your takeaways.
Oof, 3 big life lessons. I think first that life is short, that it's not guaranteed, that we have a lot of tremendous opportunity, and to not take that for granted. That isn't necessarily aligned with my military career, but some other things that have happened personally in my life. So that's something that motivates me moving forward, is living for those that I lost, that my husband lost in our family. So we've felt that very intimately. So do it now. Don't wait for tomorrow. Tomorrow is not promised. And really listen. I guess to point 2, there is something inside each one of us that speaks to what we want to do or who we are, and culture, society, the world can drown out some of that voice if you, by means of survival, have to, allow it to drown out of it, or you just take the path of least resistance. But I think that if I had to, I don't know, I wouldn't do anything differently, but really tuning into that inner dialogue and knowing that,
Paying attention.
exactly. Like listen to
like
it.
Following your gut.
It's hard, right? With the military, that sort of strips you of that identity.
Yeah.
Once you come out of the service, being able to turn the volume up on that inner voice can be really challenging, and that's sort of what I'm exploring big time right now.
It's. I remember when I got out, it was like, how do I even do this? They had a manual for this. I don't know what I'm doing. So, you mean to fix that? Cool. Where's the manual? Oh, we don't have one.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So what's one more lesson? And then out of those 3 lessons, what would you have told the younger Joanne?
Oh, younger Joanna. I don't know that I would have listened to. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that, in that even in watching my own children, there's a lot of skinning of your knees that you have to do for the lessons to really stick.
Yeah.
And I remember my mom and dad both telling me, I know what you're going through. I know how hard this is. And me responding, no, you don't understand. Of course, you don't know what I'm going through. And now, as the parent, now as the adult, like seeing my son struggle with things that I know are going to get better, that just through the repetitions of life experience, you can get through. But it's those first and second times that you're faced with really difficult things that you sometimes don't feel like you're going to get through. So I guess giving advice to my younger self would just be like, write it out, feel the things, learn from it. How are
Life's
you gonna?
short.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
This happened. What are you gonna learn from it? How are you going to make the most of it moving forward?
I think that's a big thing, because failure is a great motivator and a teacher. Because if you're always winning, you don't know why sometimes. So, but when you fail, oh, I did that and that didn't work. It's not necessarily my fault or not, but I won't do that again.
Sure.
So-
Well, I will share that, like, in this period of sort of self-discovery and reflection, you read a lot of books, you listen to a lot of podcasts, and that's certainly a theme that comes up, right? Like, the most successful people are those that have just continually failed and have not let that stop them. You know, they've dusted themselves off and figured out how to pivot, how to maneuver, how to learn, how to, take that scar to make it hurt less the next time. Like, it's just relentless pursuit of their vision.
Resiliency.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Which the Army teaches you a lot of, but it's it's not necessarily yours to own. And I think as a startup, there's this responsibility that is so tremendous that you have to really trust yourself that failure is just one of the ingredients to success.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn over for some
Yeah.
Q&A.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions about the conversation for Johanna or myself or Andrew?
Nope, not for me.
Not for you? Yeah. He was taking notes the whole time.
So busy writing.
If no questions, we could just like go around and then just like introduce, sorry. There you go.
Sure.
There we are.
Break the ice.
We're sort of universal and not like gender specific, but I'm curious. I know the transition period is hard for a lot of people. I struggled with it really bad the first time around. And so as a woman, do you think it's different transitioning out and like going into like as you go into
Sure. So Ted, that's a very thoughtful question, and I appreciate you asking that. I don't know if you knew that tomorrow is Women Veterans Day, but very apropos to point that out. And I would say that yes, I mean, I can't speak from the position of a man, right? But one of the things that has struck me most, which I was not prepared for, is as a woman in the service, you just by ratios are very visible. You are one of 20, or your work sometimes, whether true or untrue, and depending on who is evaluating it, can be looked through the lens of not just being, a lieutenant, for example, but a female. So I remember as a lieutenant, I felt like when I made a mistake, it wasn't because I was a lieutenant. All lieutenants make mistakes. I felt it was because I was a woman sometimes. So I felt like a heightened sense of scrutiny and attention while I was in the service. Coming out of the service, I felt that my service was far less visible than a man's service and what people think when they consider what a veteran is. And so you go from being like kind of spotlighted to almost not reduced, that's not the right word, but you don't fit the mold of what a veteran is, and you almost have to really more aggressively advocate for the fact that you served too. You did the thing that the guy did, right? And people will often assume when my husband and I are out that he was the veteran, right? It's just the sort of the nature of the beast, I guess. And so it can be tiring to sort of have to really advocate for yourself in a way that I don't know that male veterans have to in the same way. So I think that would be sort of the biggest thing that I have found that is something that I wasn't anticipating or expecting, but I will also share that I've been blown away by the amount of women that also feel that way and want to come together to create space to address that and find community. In fact, Jenny in this room is a founder of a startup that does just that. And I think that women are finding their ways to those communities to help mitigate that struggle.
Steve Amos. Yes. Johanna, thanks so much for sharing. This has been really insightful. But thinking of that it's women in the military tomorrow, just curious, two questions, if you don't mind sharing. One is, what changes did you see over the 20 years? And what advice would you share right now with a young lady who's thinking about the military?
Wow, that second one's a tough one, given the state of affairs. But the first question, I would say that I was really, really, really fortunate in that so many of my experiences, and I'm not sure if it was because of the branch, military intelligence does have a slightly higher ratio of female leaders, and the universe maybe knew I wouldn't make it unless given some strong mentorship from strong women, but I had a number of assignments with female leaders. As a company XO, as a company commander, deployed, I was extremely fortunate. And I say that because when I was in organizations where my wasn't directly reporting to a woman, it was a little bit more difficult. I felt very seen and heard in a way that I didn't always feel under male leadership. And I don't know that it was intentional. I think a lot of it was just the way we're raised. And anyway, I had a lot of fortune in that regard. So I think that their situation and having to break down barriers and bust through ceilings was much more severe or much more challenging than what I personally experienced, because I had the fortune of their trailblazing and really seeing and hearing me person as a leader. And then I think I would give the advice, a woman, a male, just to really be true to yourself. One lesson that my father shared with me was never change who you are for the Army. And sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't. Like in certain organizations, who I was really appreciated. And I think in Army Futures Command, that was a great fit for me. But there were some organizations where being myself was harder. But I would say stay true to who you are. And like I said, I would give that advice to a woman and a man.
We could talk for
Yeah.
hours more, but we probably need to get to the networking.
Thank you. Thanks.
We got one more.
So
We got one
real
more.
quick, my ask
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
is to just keep showing up.
Yeah.
This is how we build community, is to keep showing up. Building relationships doesn't happen overnight. So this is gonna happen monthly. There's other events that are gonna happen that we're directly and tangentially related to, and that's how we're really gonna build the network, is to get to know each other over time. This is a great start, but keep showing up. And then my give is also in honor of Father's Day. I lost my dad to a distracted driver a few years back. He was crossing the street in Alexandria, Virginia. He had 35 years in the Army, Vietnam, all the things. And I only share that because pay attention when you're driving, and also take advantage of every day, right? Because you never know. And he had this book, 101 Famous Poems, highly recommend it. I'm not going to read you the whole poem, it's a little bit long, but it's called A Psalm of Life by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, and I'm just going to read the end because I think it applies. Lives of great men and women all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Footprints that perhaps another, sailing over life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother or sister, seeing shall take heart again. Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. So, yeah, let's keep showing up.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for everyone showing up. We're going to clean up the area. What?
Don't close us out, we got blue tickets and raffles.
Oh, the raffles. Okay.
I got a raffle going on.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thanks. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Lauren
thanks
does a
for
much
coming.
better job than I do.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah. Cool.
I know.
Now we got to put the room back together.
I know.
Yeah.
When does our bookings
Really
here?
good to see you. I know I already gave
8:30.
you five.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you everyone for showing up. We'll be back
I
at Capital
guess so. I
Factory
don't
next
know.
week.
Lauren,
Yeah.
you know Lauren
Yeah.
Klossner?
Go see us next
If
month.
not, you gotta
Next month.
link
Yeah,
up
next
with
week.
her.
Got a special guest. It'll be lots of
Yes.
fun.
Oh, good. Good.